The opening scene begins with a narration, telling us about the outbreak of the Third World War in the early 21st century that significantly affected human civilization. After the war, the survivors sought to create a conflict-free world out of concern that humanity cannot possibly survive a fourth global conflict. We then cut to Libya, a totalitarian city-state established by the survivors. They blame human emotion as the root cause for war. As a result, any activity or object that stimulates emotion is strictly banned in the city. Those in violation are labeled as sense offenders and are sentenced to death. The population is forced to take a daily injection of a drug, prosium 2, in order to suppress emotion, making them cold-hearted beings. Libya is governed by the Tetragrammaton Council, headed by Father, who communicates propaganda via large video screens. At the pinnacle of law enforcement are the Grammaton cleric, soldiers who are highly trained in the martial art of gun kata. These clerics frequently raid homes to search for and destroy emotion-provoking materials such as art, literature and music, and ultimately execute violators on sight. Outside the city, there's an abandoned area called the Nether, where a resistance group called the Underground carries out illegal activities. One day, a Grammaton cleric, John Preston, and his partner, Partridge, lead their special force to raid those rebels. Soon after, a fierce gunfight ensues between the two parties, forcing the underground group to retreat. When the cleric force comes across an unknown number of resistance members barricading themselves inside a room, they call John to deal with them. With firearms in both hands, John breaks into the room and waits in the dark until the rebels stop firing. Upon calculating the number and location of the insurgents, they soon find a huge collection of books and paintings, including the Mona Lisa. After verifying its authenticity, John orders the men to set it ablaze. On their way back to the headquarters, John notices that his partner has taken a poetry book instead of turning it in for incineration. When questioned, Errol tells him that he wanted to personally log it himself because the team doesn't always keep proper records of forbidden materials. Later on, John goes to see Vice Consul Dupont to report about the recent raid. During this, Dupont wonders how John manages to sense when someone feels strong emotions, but the latter has no answer to it. When Dupont asks about his family, John coldly replies that his wife was executed for being a sex offender, leaving him as a single father of two. After exiting the Vice Consul's office, he proceeds to the evidentiary department to review records, only to discover that Errol hasn't submitted any evidence for weeks. Suspicious, he goes to the Nether and finds Errol reading the forbidden book. When he confronts him, Errol laments that people have lost everything that makes them human. John reminds him that there's no war and murder in this new world, but the latter contends that he'd gladly pay the price to make humans feel emotions again. He then tries to reach for his gun, but John is able to sense it and guns him down without hesitation. Back at home, John's son, Robbie, informs him that he witnessed a boy crying earlier. He asks if he should report it to the authorities, to which he affirms. After retiring to bed, John dreams of his wife being arrested. When the authorities broke in, he quickly disarmed two men, but he stopped as soon as they revealed his wife was a sex offender. Before being taken away, she kissed him and asked him not to forget her. The next morning, while getting ready, John accidentally drops his morning vial of prosium. Robbie notices this, so he reminds his father to stop by the Equilibrium Center to get a replacement. However, when John arrives at the center, he discovers that it's temporarily closed due to trouble caused by some terrorists. Just then, Errol's replacement, Andrew Brandt, comes to pick John up for their next raid at a suspected sex offender named Mary's house. Upon arrival, John pushes Mary against the mirror, but he freezes when he's reminded of his wife. He somehow manages to recover and proceeds to look around the house. They soon discover a secret room filled with EC-10 rated stuff. Knowing that she would be executed, Mary grabs an officer's gun and aims it at John. Andrew tries to shoot her in retaliation, but John stops him, arguing that they still need her to locate her associates. Andrew feels something amiss, but he decides to comply with his senior's order. Later, during interrogation, John asks her about the other rebels, but she ignores the questions and instead asks him about his purpose for living. He replies that his purpose is to serve Libria and safeguard the continuity of society. Unsatisfied, Mary despises him for living an emotionless life and compares his life with a moving clock, which is just passing time. The following morning, John wakes up after experiencing a bad dream. He then quickly peels off the tint on the window in his room, allowing him to see the sunrise for the first time. The captivating sight leaves him in awe, and sensing unfamiliar emotions, he hurries to the bathroom to load a dose of prosium into the syringe gun. However, after some contemplation, he opts not to take it and hides it behind the mirror. Upon arriving at the headquarters, John is informed about their next mission of eliminating another group of sex offenders. During the raid, a man rushes towards him, so Andrew guns him down. When John catches the guy, he accidentally stares into his eyes and sees the life leave the body. Upset by the things he's noticing now, he immediately drops the body, only to feel worse when he notices blood on his hands. While the officers kill all the rebels, John discovers a secret room filled with EC-10 items. He looks around for a while and plays music. This overwhelms him with emotions, breaking him down into tears. Afterwards, John watches as the team burns down all the illicit stuff in the secret room. Just then, an officer informs them that they've found some dogs kept by members of the underground. Andrew orders the team to eliminate all of them. John tries to object, but he can't think of any good reason, forcing him to comply. Amidst this, one of the puppies tries to escape, and John grabs it before it gets away. Andrew tells him to toss it back down, but the overwhelmed John takes it away, claiming that it should be tested for diseases. His hesitation causes Andrew to grow suspicious towards him. Disturbed by the continuous killing of innocent people, John visits DuPont and suggests that sex offenders be interrogated instead of being eliminated. However, DuPont says that they have to follow Father's orders, which is to eliminate insurgents on sight. That evening, John tries to smuggle the earlier puppy out of the headquarters by hiding it in his car trunk. Upon driving to Nether, he releases the puppy, urging it to go away, but it persistently follows him. Unable to abandon the creature, John places it back in the trunk and also gives his coat for warmth. Right then, some patrolling officers surround him, demanding identification. Turns out that his ID card is in the coat inside the trunk, which he can't open. The officers then snatch his car keys and proceed to inspect it. Just before they open the trunk, one of the officers recognizes him and apologizes for the trouble. Unfortunately, the puppy barks, alerting the officers. They open the trunk and discover the puppy, prompting them to hold John at gunpoint. Now that he's caught, John fights the officers and swiftly executes everyone with their own guns. The next day, he is seen in the headquarters, practicing his fighting moves. Not long after, he's joined by Andrew and the two engage in a friendly fight. During this, Andrew claims that he knows John is unable to move on from the earlier raid incident, but the latter brushes it off. After practice, Andrew tells him to get ready as they're going for another raid in the Nether. Later, during the operation, John comes across a group of rebels, but refrains from executing them. Instead, he guides them away from the authorities, even clashing with some officers along the way. However, he accidentally leads them into a room where Andrew and other exterminators are waiting. As a result, the rebels are lined up against the wall for execution. John attempts to persuade the officers to take them for interrogation, but Andrew reminds him of Father's orders. With no other choice, John walks away, leaving those rebels to be executed. Afterwards, John visits the morgue and expresses remorse to Errol's body for killing him. He goes through his belongings and stumbles upon a photograph with "Freedom" written on its back. He then visits Mary and asks her about Errol. When she refuses to recognize him, John shows her a photo of her and Errol together. Furthermore, he reveals that he's the one who killed him. This revelation fills her with rage, so she immediately grabs a pen in an attempt to stab him. He confronts the teacher and threatens him into divulging details about Errol. The teacher then reveals that Errol often came here to meet with a man named Jürgen. Additionally, John discovers a secret compartment on the opposite side of the room's wall. Upon breaking in, he meets Jürgen, who admits that they've been observing him for a long time. The man then leads John to the underground, where rebels have made a small community. Before further discussion, John is put on a polygraph test to make sure that he's feeling emotions. Upon confirming his loyalty towards them, Jürgen finally reveals their plan to assassinate Father and dismantle Prosium production, bringing the council down. Since it'll be difficult for the rebels to do so, Jürgen asks John to help them, which the latter agrees. Later that day, John is summoned by Dupont, who reveals that there's a traitor in the upper ranks of the clerics. Although the vice council has some doubt towards John, he assigns him the task of unmasking the traitor. John then returns home and hides another dose of Prosium behind the mirror. The following day, John goes to the headquarters and watches the preparation for Mary's execution on video monitors. This prompts recollections of his wife, leading him to watch footage of her execution. He is distraught to see himself standing completely emotionless during that time. Wanting to make up for his mistake, he runs towards the incineration room to save Mary. Sadly, it's too late as she is already put inside the chamber and turbines have been started. John tries his best to hold back his tears as he sees her die. Upon walking out, he's unable to bear her death, causing him to have an emotional breakdown. At the same time, Andrew spots him and arrests him for being the traitor. Taken to Dupont, Andrew discloses John's involvement with the rebels, also accusing him of killing their fellow officers. But unexpectedly, John turns the table around and accuses Andrew of being the traitor. He claims that Andrew was the one who killed their officers during the previous raid. Further reveals that he and his sister had stopped taking Prosium ever since their mother died. In the next scene, John collaborates with the rebels to start their revolutionary plan. First of all, he contacts the council and informs them that he has located the rebels' leaders. Following this, the authorities arrest all the leaders of the rebel groups. This makes John easier to convince Dupont to grant him an audience with Father. He is then dressed up in white attire for the meeting. Before that, he is subjected to a polygraph test for a safety purpose. In the midst of this, Andrew shows up, revealing that he was never arrested. Just then, Father appears on screen and discloses that it was part of a ruse to expose John and infiltrate the rebels. In addition, Father unveils his true identity as none other than Dupont, disclosing that the real Father had perished many years ago. This deception fills